Hello and welcome back to OCCFO Technologies. In this video, we will start building the model part of our MVC application. As you remember from the previous video, we are using the Getting Started in tutorial from the Laminas site to guide us. We have already created a database with some few records and have connected our application to it. So, let's continue from there by creating our album entity. Now I'm using Visual Studio and I've already loaded my root folder into it. Let's go to module album src and then create our entity folder. Then in entity, let's create a new file called album.php. Open your PHP tab, namespace album entity, then use Doctrine ORM mapping as ORM. At ORM entity repository class album repository album repository. Now this file doesn't exist, so we have to create it. Create the folder in src repository and then under it create a new file called album repository.php. Namespace album repository. Then we will use Doctrine ORM entity repository. And our class will be album repository class. We'll extend it to entity repository. Save. We'll leave it like this for now. And then go back to the album file. We will add the table here. Name will be album. Now this is the name of our album table. album. And so we are going to create our properties for the ID, artist, and the title, and then creating the getters and setters for it. But before that, let's bring our class album here. Let me copy and paste this code here. So these are the properties: ID, artist, and title with the column names. Then we have our getters and setters here. The get ID, set ID, get artist, set artist, and then get title, set title. Save, then create a new folder in SRC and name it service. And under service, let's create a file called album manager.php. Under the same service, create a folder called factory. Then under factory, create a file called album manager factory.php. Open your PHP tab. Namespace album service factory. Use interrupt container. Container interface. Then use for album service manager. Then the class will be album manager factory. We have our public function double underscore invoke container interface container. Let me make the view word wrap. Yes. So container interface container requested name array options equals to now. Then we have our entity manager here. Then we will return the entity manager to the album manager. Save and then go to the album manager. Namespace album service. Use album entity album and our class will be here album manager. So you have our constructor here. Then you create a method that will add new album. Then this method will be used to update our album. Then the delete album will also be used to delete a record in a database. Save, and let's go back to our album controller. Let's first create a factory for the album controller. New folder. Okay, here will be factory. Then under factory, we will create a new file called album controller factory. PHP. Your PHP tag, the namespace, album controller factory. We want to use interrupt container interface, and the Laminas service manager factory interface. Then the album controller, and then we use the service album manager as well. Now let's bring our class here. Class name will be album controller factory, and we'll implement factory interface. So we'll use the container to get the Doctrine entity manager and save it in the entity manager variable. And then we'll get the album manager as well and save it in the album manager variable. And then return it to the album controller. Save, then go to the album controller. Now in the album controller, we will use album entity album here. Then we will call our private properties here. Is the entity manager from Doctrine ORM entity manager, then the album service manager. You will create a constructor here, and then we'll pass the properties in it. So now we want to retrieve all data from the database. So we will use variable album. This entity manager get repository from the album class. Find all. Let me wrap. Okay, so we are using the entity manager to get the repository from the album class, and then we are saving it in the album. Now, to be able to view, to return this to the view, to our view, we will have to pass the variable um, to the album, and name of your save. So we are passing this variable to this here, and now let's go to our view. So let's go back to the view, and then retrieve the data for the user in the index page. This is what we have so far. I'll go to the Laminas tutorial to the last end, and I'll copy this. Okay, and I'll paste it here. So I will change this to get title. This will be get artist, and I'll do the same thing for here. Get ID. Get ID. Now one more thing to do. Go to your config, model config under album, then change this controller, album controller class invocable. Change the invocable to controller. Album controller factory view. Let's add our service manager here. So service manager, service factory, album manager factory. Let's now add our doctrine here. Or let me bring it to the last end. So doctrine, the driver namespace driver class, annotation driver class. We don't have the annotation driver class yet, so let's add it here. Use doctrine ORM mapping driver annotation. Okay. So that will be all for now. Let's save and then go to our web browser and then refresh this page. Okay. Undefined variable albums in D. Okay, so this is supposed to be albums. Save. Yeah.